Hello and welcome to another episode of Sandy Killer Projects. In this episode, we had planned on putting gull-wing doors on the front doors, but in the process of doing all this, we decided to leave the Lambo doors on the front and set up installing gull-wing doors on the rear. So to start doing this, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go inside of this door here. We're going to start pulling the hardware off of the inside. This will go very similar to the Lambo door video if you've seen that. It's a pretty simple process of removing hardware. Once that's done, we'll start working on mounting the new setup up. Unlike our Lambo door kit that we were able to get aftermarket through our affiliate sponsor Beaver, nobody makes a gull-wing door kit. So for us to make this work, we're going to end up having to jerry-rig stuff, and I'm actually going to use a couple of the shocks that were given for this kit on this door because they'll be strong enough to be able to hold the weight of the door after we install our makeshift version of a kit. All right, so here it is with the door off. There's not much to it. It's very similar to the other side. There's a plug that goes into this end, which I cut off because I don't need to hook up the doors. There's a mechanism that goes to this end, which is held on here with a 10mm. I cut that off. And then there are some screws that go into these couple of mounts here and here. And that's what mounts the door in place. All right, so for the other side of the door, I cut the weather strip stuff off of the top all the way across. And then I have a piano hinge, and I'm not exactly sure if I'm gonna leave it like this or if I'm gonna split it up in a couple of spots. But we're gonna take that, we're gonna weld this onto the top of the door here. I'm gonna try and figure out how to stitch the other end onto here somehow so that the door can pivot off of this hinge. So for our first attempt at mounting up the door, what we're going to do is spot weld in through the little mount holes for this piano hinge all along the top of this. And then we're going to try and get the door up above in position to where we can spot weld these onto the car. Okay, so we made it work, but it failed almost instantly because the hinges that I got are too weak. So what we figured out to do was to weld and screw the hinges up to the top and on the inside. Then we took the brackets for the shocks and we mounted it to the inside of the vehicle so they wouldn't get into the way of the door frame and bolted it through the frame piece. But like I said, these are like 150-pound springs. These are like 50-pound doors. When we took the ladder out from underneath it and then started to push the door downward, the amount of force that it took to overcome the spring, they ended up breaking the welds off of the piano hinge right along this spot right here. So what we're going to try now is probably like some outside door hinges, or maybe like even using like the original door hinges on the outside and just welding them to it. But we did actually have it set up to where it was hanging and there was no ladder holding the door up. It just wasn't strong enough on the hinge. Okay, so right now we have everything taken back out. The door is actually sitting on its latch, so the whole front side of the door is just floating at the moment. We took the hinge out that we put in, which it wasn't the welds that failed, it was actually the hinge itself. This is too thin for the amount of weight that we were putting on the door. And what we're going to try is this. What we're going to do is something similar to like a Jeep hinge. We're going to mount these on the outside. Again, we don't really care what this looks like, just that it works. We've managed to take the two original door hinges and flatten them out. These are more than heavy duty enough. We're just going to bolt these straight through the side and straight through the roof. We're going to put two on, one over here, and that'll make it to where the door will be able to pivot off of these two mounts. All right, so this is what we came up with in the process of trying to figure out another way to mount these doors and have sturdy enough hinges. It looks like something similar to a Jeep hinge. Yeah, it's buckled the side of the car, but this is more about doing the project than it is about making it look pretty. So what we did was we took the original door hinge and we cut it and flattened it out so that it could be used in the position that it's in, and so that it would allow the amount of vertical travel that we needed to get the door to go upwards. So this is what it looks like open. Right now it's currently being supported by a step ladder, and the reason for that is these shocks that came with the Lambo door kit. I looked up the code that's on here for its strength and power, and it turns out these are 180-pound gas struts, and that's just too heavy for the use that we have. These doors only weigh about 50 pounds. So I ended up having to order new shocks because of the fact that when we tried to use these, as you can see right here, this is where we set the upper mount. This is what the original one looked like. It was severely bent, so it was actually bent worse, and I straightened it out to get the door back open. But we replaced this, and then the other mount side, we were going directly through the frame. We moved some of the material out of the way so the shock could actually sit to the inside, giving us more clearance for when the door shuts. So this setup seems to work best, but we're gonna get some lighter shocks. Those lighter shocks will make it easier for the door to close, and then we won't have problems with it trying to rip the hinges off of the top, which is what it was trying to do again. All right, so this is as completed as it's going to get for this project. As you can see, I've got the door up, and it does work. It doesn't work well though. The reason why is because I needed a much lighter shock than the ones that came with the Lambo kit. These shocks are roughly about 60 pounds in weight apiece, and one of them will not hold the weight of the door up, so I ended up having to install two. The door does rotate up and down, but I really don't want to close it all the way because of the fact that this hinge setup is going into the window frame, and this hinge setup is going into some sheet metal, which is right there. And if I put too much pressure on it, what's going to end up happening is one of those shocks is going to end up going through the glass. This car was not designed or intended to have this setup on it, and because of that, I could make it work better than it does in this setup. But the problem is, if I were to do that, I would end up having to reinforce the roof framing. I would end up having to reinforce the door framing. I would end up having to reinforce the door sill framing because of the fact that none of this is designed to be able to take this. And because this is just a for fun project to see if we could do it, this is where it's going to stop. Most likely what will end up happening after this point is I'll end up taking these two shocks off of it and just closing the door and not using it, and it'll be hinged vertically, which is as nonsensical as it looks. One of the problems with gull wing doors like this is that it doesn't really work in a practical situation. If you want to get into this car, you have to duck way down and then climb into the car, avoiding the door, and then reach all the way out to the door and pull it down to get it closed. That's strange and not realistic, and it looks cool, but unless the car is designed for it, like let's say a DeLorean that came with gull wing doors, it doesn't really work on this. So let's talk about the practical application of this job in particular. If you're going to try to attempt something like this, being a basic mechanic, having the ability to change the oil and do the spark plugs on a car is probably not going to be enough knowledge to be able to get you through this job simply and easily. This job in particular is going to require the ability to cut, weld, do metal work, especially if you're going to try and make this actually working and functional. The biggest problem with this setup is I'm trying to do it on a stock setup with what I've got, only adding the minimum amount of stuff. If I wanted to actually make this happen for real and we were going to do this on a regular car, I would have to modify the interior of the car to be able to accept a setup to make the gull wing doors work, and the gull wing doors would have to sit much higher, so it's easier to get in and out of the car. In this particular case, we did this just for fun to see if it was possible, and yes, it is. But does it work? Not very well. So I want to give a special thanks to Bill on this one. He's part owner on the car, but he came out and helped me do this the first day when we did most of the major work to be able to get the doors hung. I wouldn't have been able to do that by myself. Holding 60, 80 pound doors above my head, or even using ladders and stuff and to hold it in place, wasn't really realistic without someone's help. So I'm glad he came out and gave me a hand. As always, thank you for watching. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll keep making more content.